Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. And in this video, I want to talk about why you want to deal with rich people, especially if you want to make money, than poor people, right? And the easiest way to get rich is to sell to people who have money. And poor people do not have money, and this is kind of like a chicken and the egg thing. And if you're poor right now and you're surrounded by poor people, think of yourself as that smart kid in an awful school, right? And so if you ever make it out of that awful school, don't go back to it or don't go back to teach there, right? Teach at the good school even though you were the smart kid in the awful school, right? So that's something that we have to that's really important, that we really have to consider, is that if we want to be rich, we shouldn't want to deal with poor people. And the only time that we're ever going to deal with poor people is that A, we've made our money serving rich people, so we have a charity, or B, you have a huge infrastructure to deal with poor people like Walmart. But if you're a small business owner or you're starting out, you're probably not going to have that, right? Now, here's the funny thing about poor people. Anytime you deal with people who don't make a lot of money, in theory, you should be making more money. If that make it, and I know that doesn't make any sense, right? So, an analogy that I'm gonna bring up is housing. If you've ever heard about like the classes of housing, there's like Class A, Class B, Class C, and Class D. Class D is the war zone, and Class A is like the hills. Okay, now if you ever look at financial statements and how much profit you're going to make on certain types of housing and investments, Class D theoretically is the most profitable. The war zone is the most profitable because the houses there are incredibly cheap, and you'll get a lot of return based on the rent. So what they call the price to rent ratio. But the truth is when people invest in those houses, they get a lot more than they bargain for. So I remember I talked to somebody a couple of months ago who has a rental property in, I don't know if it's a war zone area, it's probably Class C or Class D, and she said in theory, in paper, this looked good, but this property is such a headache, right? It's such a headache. That's what she said. And the way that you have to kind of think about this is that even though on paper it looks like a better return and you can make a lot of money in any type of housing, um, you have to think about poor people in the same way that lenders think about poor people, right? So if you have poor credit, what category of borrower do you fit in? You're in the subprime category, right? So you get to charge a lot more interest to that borrower than someone who has good credit, who you can't charge that much interest to. Okay? People with good credit on paper, theoretically, you don't make as much money off of them because you can't charge that much interest compared to a subprime borrower. And that is the same thing that happens, right? It's the same thing that happens with housing as well. And so what happens with a lot of people is because they think that, poor people would actually be easy sales because, maybe nobody wants to sell to them, or they idealize or romanticize working with poor people to make their life better. They're actually making life harder for themselves and everybody else, because here's what's going to happen. Poor people don't have money. And I know this seems very obvious, but a lot of people, for some reason, as they get older, they just cannot make that connection, right? Poor people don't have money. Rich people do have money. If you serve poor people, let's say, for example, you're trying to sell pest control to poor people, guess what's going to happen when renewal time, let's say you even make a lot of sales in the very beginning, guess what's going to happen when renewal time approaches? They're all going to cancel. Why? Because they don't have money, right? I know it sounds kind of elementary-ish, that explanation, but they don't have money. So what you need to do is you need to sell to rich people. You need to sell to rich neighborhoods, because if you're working very hard to offer your product or service to a poor marketplace, what is the likelihood that they're going to continue to become customers of your product or service even after you sold them? It's almost zero to nil. So they're going to make your life harder, and not only that, they're probably a lot likelier to want refunds because money is scarce to them, right? And what's funny, okay, and I don't know if this is really funny, it's kind of sad, is that I hire a lot of small business owners as vendors to do work on random jobs, right? And I pretty much notice that almost nobody accepts credit cards, right? If you're a small business owner, even if you're doing well, you probably don't accept a credit card. This has just been my experience. And I remember I asked this one business owner, like, "Hey, like, why don't you accept a credit card?" And I already knew the answer um, before he even told me. And basically, he said, "Oh, it's because people, when they use a credit card, they're going to ask for a chargeback refund, and then now I'm out, a couple $100 for all the hard work I did, so I just don't accept it anymore." Right? Isn't that sad? Because as a rich person, money is not really that valuable to you compared to your time. Whereas when you're a poor person, your money seems incredibly valuable. I don't know if you ever heard that analogy about Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates, where he says, if he stopped to pick up a penny, that actually would be him losing a lot of money because he makes so much an hour. That's how rich people are, right? Rich people value their time. They don't value their money. They just happen to have a lot of money. And again, it's like a chicken and the egg thing, right? I mean, so if you're poor, how do you get more money? In my opinion, it would just be the number one ultimate solution is serve rich people, right? Obviously, there is a way to serve poor people and make a lot of money, aka Walmart. But in my opinion, you need a huge infrastructure to deal with that, because if you don't have that, and and you're a small business owner, you're going to have a very very hard time offering your product or service to the marketplace, right? In fact, I even remember a somebody from South Africa or whoever said he was a realtor, put a comment, said, "Yeah, this is so true. Whenever I go to the rich areas, the transactions are smooth, but whenever we go to poor people, they just get canceled for one reason or another, right? Poor customers are going to make life harder for you, and it's the sad truth. Not only are they going to make life harder for you, they're going to make life harder for everybody else, which is why I can't pay any small business owner with a credit card because they got burned by some poor person, right? I mean, I have over $270,000 in lines of credit, but if I'm trying to pay someone with that credit card and they don't accept it, that credit card is just as good as useless. Right? All right. So just to close this off, I'm going to read this LinkedIn article or part of it. Selling to poor people is dumb, and this is published in January 2024. So it's hard to argue that selling whatever products or services you offer to poor people is pretty dumb, right? I mean, they ain't got no money, but lots and lots of people still try to sell their stuff to these people. I guess the idea is if they can figure out a magic combination of words to say, the poor people will suddenly discover money they didn't think they had and send it over, right? But more often, I think people sell to poor people because they're easier to get a hold of. They answer their phone, they'll talk to you, and I know why they do because they don't have a lot going on in their lives, which is why they're poor. That one's pretty harsh, right? So easy to reach, but hard to get them to actually buy what you have to offer. So quick selling to poor people, sell to the wealthy. Okay, so something to think about here. All right, well, this is Korean Atlanta Mentorship. Happy Friday, everybody, and I'll just kind of hopefully it can keep cranking out a few more videos this weekend, and I'll crank out another Velocity Banking video before we end today. Have a great day, everybody. We'll speak next time.